What would you do if the man you loved, the man you built your entire life around, the man you followed across the ocean and gave up everything for, looked you in the eyes one day and said, "You have no rights here. You have nothing. And if you don't leave quietly, you will never see your child again." What would you do? Would you break? Would you run? Would you disappear into the darkness and let them win? I almost did. I almost let them destroy me completely. But I didn't. And today, sitting here in my own home, in my own name, with my daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, I am going to tell you exactly what they did to me, and exactly how I made sure they could never do it to anyone else again. My name is Rachel Myers. I am 32 years old. And this is my real story. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Not the glamorous Ohio you might imagine, not Columbus with its shining buildings and busy streets. No. I grew up in a tiny, forgettable town called Millbury, where everyone knew everyone, where the biggest event of the year was the county fair, and where girls like me were expected to grow up, marry a local boy, have babies, and never ask for more than what we were given. My mother was a nurse. My father drove a delivery truck. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. There was always just enough. Just enough food. Just enough heat in the winter. Just enough hope to keep going. But I was never satisfied with just enough. From the time I was 7 years old, I had this burning, restless feeling inside me, like I was meant for something bigger. Like the world was enormous, and I was stuck behind a glass wall, watching it spin without me, because something inside me knew my life was waiting for me there. California hit me like a wave. The first time I drove through Sacramento and saw the wide open sky, the palm trees, the energy of people moving fast and dreaming big, I felt like I had finally arrived somewhere real. Like Ohio had been a waiting room, and California was the actual destination. UC Davis was everything I had hoped for and nothing like I had imagined. It was harder, lonelier, more competitive. I was a small-town girl surrounded by people who had grown up with money, connections, confidence. People who knew how to walk into a room like they owned it. I didn't know how to do that. Not yet. But I learned. I studied finance. I worked part-time at a coffee shop on campus. I made a small group of friends, real friends, the kind who stay up with you until 3 in the morning not because they want something from you, but because they genuinely enjoy being in your company. And it was in California that I slowly, carefully, began to build the version of myself I had always imagined. By the time I graduated, I met Daniel Myers at a work event. It was one of those awkward professional mixers that nobody actually wants to attend, but everyone goes to anyway because someone senior said it was a great networking opportunity. The room was full of people in business casual holding glasses of wine they weren't really drinking, laughing at jokes that weren't really funny. I was standing near the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline, wondering how soon I could leave without it being rude, when someone appeared beside me. "You look like someone who's already calculating the earliest acceptable exit time," he said. I turned around. He was tall. Dark hair, slightly messy, like he'd run his hand through it too many times. Brown eyes that were warm and a little amused. He was wearing a navy blazer over a white shirt with no tie, and he had the kind of easy, relaxed confidence that doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from genuinely not caring what people think of him. 30 more minutes, I said. Then I'm gone. He laughed. A real laugh, not polished, not performed. Just real. "Daniel," he said, holding out his hand. "Rachel," I said, shaking it. We talked for 2 hours. We missed the earliest acceptable exit time by a long shot. Daniel was a tech project manager at a startup in the South Bay. He'd grown up in Los Angeles, gone to Berkeley, moved to San. The first 2 years with Daniel were, genuinely, some of the best of my life. He was thoughtful in the small ways that matter, the ways that tell you who a person really is when no one is watching. He remembered that I hated cilantro. He knew that I needed 20 minutes of quiet in the morning before I could talk to anyone. He brought me coffee exactly the way I liked it without being asked. He drove 4 hours round trip to pick me up when my car broke down on the freeway, and I had no one else to call. We traveled together. We cooked together, badly, laughing, making a mess of the kitchen and ordering pizza anyway. We talked about everything: politics, childhood, fear, ambition, the kind of people we wanted to become. I told him things I had never told anyone. About the loneliness of growing up feeling like I didn't belong. About the fear that no matter how hard I worked, I would never be quite enough. About the part of me that was still that small-town girl from Ohio who wasn't sure she deserved the life she was building. He listened. He held my hand. He said, "Rachel, you are the most capable person I have ever met. And the most stubborn. Which is honestly your greatest asset." I loved him completely. And I believed, the way only someone truly in love can believe, that he loved me the same way. We got engaged on a Tuesday evening in October, sitting on the floor of our apartment eating takeout Thai food, and he pulled a ring out of his jacket pocket and said, "I've been carrying this for 3 weeks waiting for the perfect moment, and I've realized there is no perfect moment. Will you marry me?" I said yes before he finished the sentence. We got married the following spring. Small ceremony. 40 people. A vineyard in Napa Valley. My mother flew in from Ohio with her good dress and her happy tears. My father shook Daniel's hand and said gruffly, "You take care of my girl," and Daniel said, "I will, sir. I promise." It was a perfect day. Or, it looked like a perfect day. Looking back now, with the clarity that only pain can give you, I can see the things I chose not to see that day. The way Daniel's best friend Marcus pulled me aside during the reception and said, carefully, quietly, "Rachel, Daniel is a good guy. But he's complicated. Just make sure you always have your own things. Your own account. Your own everything." Okay. I laughed it off. "Marcus, we're married. What's his is mine." Marcus looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and said, "Yeah, right. Congratulations, Rachel." He didn't look happy when he said it. I filed it away in the back of my mind and forgot about it. I should not have forgotten about it. 14 months after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. Daniel seemed happy, excited, even. He painted the nursery himself, a soft yellow, staying up until midnight to get it perfect. He downloaded every pregnancy app. He came to every appointment. I thought, this is it. This is our life. This is everything. Our daughter, Lily, was born on a cold February morning. She was the most extraordinary thing that had ever happened to me. I took 4 months of maternity leave. During that time, Daniel's behavior began to shift so slowly, so subtly, that I told myself I was imagining it. That I was hormonal. That I was tired. That new parenthood was hard on both of us. He started working late, coming home after Lily was already asleep, taking phone calls in the other room, lowering his voice when I walked by. I asked him once, "Is everything okay?" "At work, I mean." "Everything's fine," he said. "Just a stressful project. Don't worry about it." I tried not to worry about it. But something had changed. Something in the air between us was different, thinner, like a thread being slowly, quietly, pulled apart. I went back to work when Lily was 4 months old. I hired a part-time nanny. I threw myself back into my career because work, at least, made sense to me. Work had rules. Work had logic. Work gave me back the version of myself that felt solid and real. And at home, I began to feel. Lily was 11 months old when I found the text message. I wasn't snooping. I want to be very clear about that. Daniel had left his phone on the kitchen counter when he went to take a shower, and it lit up with a message, and I glanced at it without thinking, the way anyone would when a phone lights up right in front of them. The name on the screen was Priya. The message said, "I miss you. Last night was everything. When can I see you again?" I stood very still for a very long moment. Then I picked up the phone. I don't know what made me do it. Some part of me, the part that had been quietly, steadily building a case for months, without telling the rest of me, already knew. I scrolled up, and what I read in the next 4 minutes destroyed the life I thought I was living. I'll tell you exactly what I found, and exactly what happened next, in part 2. But I need you to understand something first. The texts were bad. The betrayal was devastating. But what Daniel did after I confronted him, what he and Priya did together, systematically, deliberately, to take everything from me, that was so much worse. That was the real nightmare. And it was only just beginning. If you are watching this and you have ever trusted someone completely, given them your whole heart, your whole life, your whole future, and had them use that trust against you like a weapon, then you already know a little of what I felt standing in that kitchen, holding my husband's phone, with my baby daughter asleep down the hall. Part 2 is coming. And I promise you, it gets darker before it gets lighter. But it does get lighter. It always does. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because what Daniel and Priya did next, you are not going to believe it. They say the truth sets you free. But no one tells you what happens before that. No one tells you about the moment the truth lands on your chest like a concrete block and you genuinely cannot breathe, cannot think, cannot remember who you were 5 minutes ago before everything changed. No one tells you that the worst part of betrayal isn't the betrayal itself. It's the realization that the life you were living was never entirely real. My name is Rachel Myers. I'm 32 years old. I live in California. And in part 1, I told you about the text message I found on my husband Daniel's phone, the one from a woman named Priya. Today, I'm going to tell you what happened when I confronted him. And what he did next that almost destroyed me completely. I put the phone back on the counter exactly where Daniel had left it. I walked to the living room. I sat down on the couch. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs and I breathed slowly, deliberately, the way you breathe when the only alternative is screaming. By the time Daniel came out of the shower, towel around his shoulders, hair still damp, I had made a decision. I was not going to cry. I was not going to scream. I was going to be completely, absolutely calm. Because I needed to see his face. I needed to see the unguarded, unscripted truth of who this man was, in the half-second before he had time to construct a story. "Who is Priya?" I said. He stopped walking. That half-second, I saw it. I saw everything in that half-second. The flash of panic. The rapid internal calculation. The decision about which version of himself to present to me. "What?" he said. Casual. Confused. Buying time. "Priya," I said again. "The woman who texted you 12 minutes ago to say she misses you and last night was everything. You never tried to talk to me about anything," I said. My voice was very quiet. "You came home late. You took calls in the other room. And instead of talking to me, you went to her." He didn't answer that. Because there was no answer. "I want you to leave," I said. "Tonight. I want you to take whatever you need for a few days, and I want you to leave." He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "That's fair. We can talk about everything when things are calmer." He packed a bag. He kissed Lily on the forehead while she slept, and I stood in the doorway watching him do it, and I felt something cold and sharp move through me, because even then, even in that moment, something told me this was not going to be simple. He left. I locked the door behind him. And then, finally, alone, I sat down on the kitchen floor, and I cried until I had nothing left. In the days that followed, I learned about Priya. Not from Daniel. He had gone quiet, responding to my messages in short, careful sentences that told me nothing. I learned about her the way you learn about things you never wanted to know, through mutual connections, through social media, through the slow, horrible piecing together of a picture you wish you'd never started assembling. Her name was Priya Kapoor. She was 26 years old. She worked at Daniel's company, not on his team, but in the same building, which explained the late evenings and the vague work events, and the conferences he'd attended alone. She was beautiful. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. She had long dark hair and a bright, wide smile and an Instagram full of hiking photos and brunch pictures, and the kind of effortless, abundant life that looks perfect from the outside. I found a photo of her and Daniel together, not romantic, just a group work photo, and I stared at it for a long time. She looked so young. I didn't hate her. Not yet. That came later and for different reasons. In those first days, I was too devastated to hate anyone except myself, for not seeing it, for not knowing. 2 weeks after Daniel left, I called a divorce attorney. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and calm, and exactly the kind of woman you want in your corner when your life is falling apart. She wore reading glasses on a chain and took notes on a yellow legal pad and listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me over her glasses and said, "Rachel, the most important thing right now is documentation. Bank accounts, credit cards, assets, property. Do you have full visibility into your joint finances?" "I thought so," I said. But. I hesitated. Daniel handled most of the financial accounts. I trusted him. I have my own salary going into a joint account, and I have access to it, but I've never looked very closely at the full picture. I trusted him, I said again, and the words felt like something I was confessing. Margaret nodded slowly. "Okay, I want you to go home tonight and pull every financial statement you can access. Every account. Every credit card. Every investment account. Can you do that? Yes, I said. Good. And Rachel, do you have your immigration documents? Your green card? I frowned. Yes. They're in our home filing cabinet. Why? Just making sure you know where they are, she said. Because I was exhausted, because I was taking care of a newborn and working full-time, and I trusted my husband. The total amount he had moved out of our joint accounts and into an account I had no visibility into was just over $47,000. I sat at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, Lily asleep down the hall, and I looked at those numbers until they stopped feeling real. $47,000. Money I had earned. Money I had contributed to our joint accounts. Gone. And then I went to the filing cabinet. And the green card was not there. I want to pause here and explain something for anyone who might not fully understand what a green card means. A green card, officially called a permanent resident card, is the document that gives a non-citizen the legal right to live and work permanently in the United States. It is one of the most important 3 minutes of silence. Then, I think you should calm down. You're probably just not looking in the right place. I stared at my phone. And I knew with absolute bone-deep certainty. He had taken it. The next morning, I called Margaret Holloway before her office officially opened. When she answered, I told her everything: the money, the missing green card, all of it. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, very carefully, Rachel, I need you to listen to me. What you're describing is not a coincidence. This is a strategy. Someone has advised Daniel, or Daniel himself has decided, to put you in the most vulnerable position possible before this divorce formally begins. The missing money weakens your financial position. The missing green card is designed to make you feel like you have no legal footing in this country. To make you feel like you have no choice but to accept whatever terms he offers. But your status is secure, she said. It was Vanessa who first told me about Priya's involvement beyond the affair. Rachel, she said one evening, sitting across from me at my kitchen table, her voice careful in the way it gets when she's about to say something she knows is going to hurt. I need to tell you something. And I need you to not fall apart, because you can't afford to fall apart right now. Tell me, I said. Priya is an accountant. I looked at her. She works in Daniel's company's finance department. She has been, apparently, from what I've heard, helping him structure the money transfers. She knows exactly what she's doing. This isn't just an affair, Rachel. She's been helping him plan this. The room felt very still. How do you know this? I asked. Marcus told me. Marcus, Daniel's best friend. The one who had warned me at our wedding. He feels terrible. He's known something was wrong for months, but he didn't know the extent of it. When he found out about the money and the green card, he called me. I thought about Marcus at our wedding reception. Make sure you always have your own things. Your own account. Your own everything. He had known even then. Or suspected. He's willing to give a statement, Vanessa said. To your lawyer. He's willing to tell them everything he knows. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something other than devastation. I felt the very first, fragile spark of something else. It felt like fight. 3 weeks after he moved out, Daniel showed up at my door unannounced. It was 7 in the evening. Lily had just had her bath and was in her pajamas, soft and warm and smelling like lavender baby shampoo, sitting in my lap while I read to her. It was the best part of my day, the only part where I forgot, for 20 minutes, that my life was unraveling. The doorbell rang. I opened it with Lily on my hip. Daniel was standing on the doorstep. And behind him, standing slightly to the side, her face composed and unreadable, was Priya. I cannot fully describe what it felt like to see her standing at the door of the home I shared with my husband, with my daughter on my hip. What are you doing here? I said. My voice was very flat. I want to see Lily, Daniel said. You can arrange that through our attorneys. Rachel, don't do this. She's my daughter. You have an attorney, I said. Call them. And then Priya spoke. Her voice was calm, almost kind, which made it so much worse. Rachel, she said, we just want what's best for Lily. We think it would be better for everyone if we could work this out without making it more complicated than it needs to be. She said we. She was standing at my door with my husband, talking about my daughter, using the word we. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked at Daniel. You have an attorney, I said again. Call them. I closed the door. I stood in my hallway with Lily on my hip and my hand pressed flat against the closed door, and I breathed. Then I took out my phone and I called Margaret Holloway and I told her everything. Document the time and what was said, she told me. This is exactly the kind of behavior we need on record. Margaret, I said, I need you to understand something. They're not going to get my daughter. Whatever they try, Rachel, she said, and for the first time I heard something warmer underneath the professionalism. I have been doing this for 22 years. And I promise you, nobody is taking your baby. I want to be honest with you. Because this is a true story, and true stories have moments that are not heroic or inspiring or cinematic. They have moments that are just dark. 3 weeks after Daniel showed up with Priya at my door, I had the worst night of my life. It was a Sunday. Lily was with Daniel for a court-approved supervised visit. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt wrong, the particular silence of a space that is supposed to contain a child and doesn't. I sat on the bathroom floor. I'm not going to dress that up or make it sound better than it was. I sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub, and I thought about everything I had lost, and everything I was still losing, and everything I was terrified of losing, and I felt the specific, suffocating hopelessness of a person who has fought hard for a long time and has started to wonder if the fighting will ever be enough. I called my mother. Mom, I said, I don't know if I can do this. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Rachel, listen to me. You drove and the next morning, I woke up and kept fighting. I know this part of the story is hard to listen to. It was hard to live. But I need you to stay with me. Because part 3 is where everything changes. Part 3 is where I stopped surviving and started fighting back. And what I discovered, what Marcus told me, what my attorney uncovered, what Priya didn't know that I knew, it changed everything. Part 3 is coming. Do not go anywhere. And if you are going through something that feels as dark as this did, please hear me when I say, the floor is not the end. The floor is just where you rest before you stand back up. Like and subscribe. I'll see you in part 3. There is a moment in every battle when something shifts. When you stop reacting and start acting. When the fear is still there, it never fully leaves, but it moves to the background. And what comes forward, what fills the space where the fear was, is something harder. Something colder. Something that looks a lot like strategy. My name is Rachel Myers. I am 32 years old. And in part 1 and part 2, I told you how Daniel and Priya systematically dismantled my life, the affair, the stolen money, the missing green card, the night they showed up at my door together like I was supposed to just disappear quietly. In part 3, I'm going to tell you what happened when I stopped trying to survive what they were doing to me and started making sure they couldn't get away with it. This is where the story changes. Stay with me. It started with Marcus, Daniel's best friend. The man who had warned me at my own wedding reception and carried the guilt of that warning ever since. He came to my apartment on a Wednesday evening unannounced, holding a large coffee and looking like a man who hadn't slept well in weeks. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. And for the next 2 hours, he told me everything he knew. I want to start by saying I'm sorry, he said. I should have told you sooner. I knew something was wrong. I suspected about Priya for months, but I kept telling myself it wasn't my business, and that was wrong. It was absolutely my business, because you're my friend and what he is doing to you is not okay. Tell me what you know, I said. He took a breath. The money transfers, Priya structured them. She knows exactly how to move money in amounts small enough to avoid triggering automatic flags. She's been doing this professionally for years. Daniel didn't have the knowledge to do it alone. She built the whole system for him. Can you prove that? Not directly. But he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Daniel talks to me. He always has. He trusts me in the way that people trust someone when they think that person will never actually hold them accountable. He paused. He was wrong about that. He showed me his phone. Text messages. Months of them. Daniel, in his own words, describing the plan, the money, the green card, a strategy to use Lily as leverage in the divorce settlement to force me into accepting terms that would leave me with almost nothing. He said that. I whispered. About Lily? Marcus's jaw tightened. He said exactly that. And I have every message saved and backed up in 3 different places. I looked at those messages for a long time. Then I looked up at Marcus. I need you to give these to my attorney, I said. That's why I'm here, he said. The meeting with Margaret Holloway the next morning was the first time I had walked into her office feeling something other than fear. I sat down across from her, put Marcus's documented evidence on her desk, and watched her read through it. Her expression didn't change. Margaret Holloway had the practiced neutrality of someone who had seen everything, but something shifted in her posture. A kind of focused alertness, like a compass needle swinging toward true north. "This," she said, setting the phone down carefully, "is significant. Tell me what we can do with it." She folded her hands on the desk. "The text messages establish intent. They show that Daniel, in his own words, planned to use your daughter as a coercive tool in divorce proceedings. That is not just relevant to asset division, that speaks directly to his fitness as a co-parent and his character as a witness in any custody dispute." "And the money?" "The $47,000. With Priya identified as the architect of the transfer strategy, we can pursue this as financial fraud within the marriage, dissipation of marital assets. We file for full restitution." And she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Priya's professional involvement potentially exposes her to separate liability. She used her professional expertise to facilitate financial fraud. That has consequences beyond your divorce." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that affect professional licenses," Margaret said simply. I sat with that for a moment. "And my green card?" "We file for a replacement immediately. That process is underway regardless of the divorce. But we also document the disappearance and the timeline, which places it squarely within the pattern of coercive behavior we are now building a case around." She looked at me steadily. "Rachel, I want you to understand something. When we walk into that courtroom, and we will walk into that courtroom, we are not walking in as the wounded party asking for mercy. We are walking in with documented financial fraud, coercive control, and evidence that your husband explicitly planned to weaponize your child against you. We are walking in to win." For the first time in months, I felt something loosen in my chest. "Good," I said. "Let's win." 6 weeks later, Daniel sat across a conference table for his deposition. I was in the room. Margaret had advised me that I didn't have to be, that some clients find it too emotional, too difficult. But I wanted to be there. I needed to look at him in a formal, legal setting and know that the power had shifted. That the carefully constructed plan he and Priya had built was about to be taken apart, piece by piece, in front of a court reporter and opposing counsel. He looked tired. Thinner than I remembered. There was something careful and guarded in his face that hadn't been there before, a watchfulness that comes from knowing you are being examined. His attorney was a man named Gerald something or other in an expensive suit who had the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to winning. He leaned back in his chair like this was all perfectly routine, like he had nothing to worry about. That confidence lasted about 45 minutes. Then Margaret began. She was extraordinary to watch. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't perform outrage or indignation. She simply asked questions, quiet, specific, precisely constructed questions, and handed Daniel enough rope to tie him. "Of course. We'll give you time to review them." In the meantime, Margaret slid a document across the table. "I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 14, which is a series of text messages between you and Marcus Ellison between March and August of last year, in which you describe, in your own words, a plan to move marital assets into a separate account in anticipation of divorce proceedings." Can you read aloud the message highlighted in yellow on page 3? The silence in that room was extraordinary. Gerald something leaned over and whispered something to Daniel. Daniel's jaw tightened. On the advice of counsel, he said quietly, "I declined to answer." Margaret nodded pleasantly. "That's noted for the record." I looked at Daniel across the table. He didn't look back at me. "Here is something I learned during this process that I want you to understand. People who do calculated, deliberate things, people who plan and scheme and construct elaborate strategies to hurt someone, they often make one critical mistake. They underestimate the person they're trying to destroy." Priya was smart. There is no denying that. She had structured the money transfers with genuine expertise, in a way that, if Marcus hadn't provided his messages, might have been very difficult to trace. She had clearly thought about this carefully. But there was one thing she hadn't accounted for: her own digital footprint. As part of the discovery process, Margaret's team subpoenaed financial records, emails, and communications related to the marital assets. And buried in that data, in a trail of emails that Priya had apparently believed were private, was a series of communications between her and Daniel that laid out the entire strategy in specific, detailed, damning terms. She had used her work email. I don't know why. Arrogance, perhaps. Overconfidence. The belief that she was too careful to get caught. But she had used her work email, a company account, subject to subpoena, to walk Daniel through the exact mechanics of moving marital assets, timed to coincide with divorce proceeding. I need to talk about the custody fight. Because it was the part of all of this that frightened me most, more than the money, more than the green card, more than anything else. Lily was everything. Daniel's attorneys filed for joint physical custody. On the surface, this seems reasonable. Fathers should be involved in their children's lives. I believe that. I genuinely believe that. But context matters. Daniel had filed for joint custody not because he had been a deeply present, involved father. The record showed clearly that he worked long hours, was frequently absent, and had not been the primary caregiver for Lily at any point in her life. He filed for joint custody because his attorneys had advised him that it was his strongest lever in the divorce settlement. If he had significant custody, I would be less likely to fight hard on the financial issues. Lily was, exactly as his own text messages had said, a bargaining chip. We had a guardian ad litem appointed, an independent attorney whose job is to represent the child's best interests, not either parents. She was a quiet woman named Dr. Sandra Reeves, and she spent 6 weeks conducting interviews, reviewing records, and observing interactions. I gave her everything. I gave her the text messages where Daniel described using Lily as leverage. I gave her documentation of his absence during Lily's first year. I gave her when she submitted her recommendation to the court, it was clear and unambiguous. Primary physical custody to the mother. The night before our final court hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and let myself feel, fully and without managing it, everything that had happened in the past 8 months. The text message on the kitchen counter. The empty filing cabinet. The bathroom floor. Marcus at my kitchen table. Margaret's voice saying we are walking in to win. And I thought about the girl I had been, the one who grew up in Millbury, Ohio, who felt like she was watching the world through glass, who drove herself to California at 18 because she believed something bigger was waiting for her. That girl had been right. Something bigger had been waiting. It just hadn't looked the way she imagined. It had looked like a fight she didn't ask for, against people she had trusted, for the life she had built with her own hands. I got up. I went to Lily's room and I stood in the doorway and watched her sleep in the yellow nursery that Daniel had painted, that specific painful detail, and I thought, everything I have done in the last 8 months, I have done for you. And I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times. Then I went back to bed. And somehow, eventually, I slept. I am not going to describe the legal proceedings in technical detail, because this is not a legal documentary, it is my story, and what I want to tell you is what it felt like. It felt like standing very still in the middle of a storm you had been preparing for, and discovering that your preparation was enough. Daniel's attorney presented their case. It was polished and professional and built on a narrative in which Daniel was a reasonable man seeking a fair resolution, and I was an unreasonable woman making things unnecessarily difficult. Then Margaret stood up. And she took that narrative apart with the quiet, methodical precision of someone who had spent 6 months preparing for exactly this moment. The text messages. The financial records. The emails from Priya's work account. Marcus's testimony. Dr. Reeves's custody recommendation. My journal. The documentation of every coercive move they had made and every piece of evidence that proved it. She presented it all without drama. Without performance. With the steady, irresistible logic of a case that was simply, factually, unanswerable. I watched Daniel's face. I know you want to know the ending right now. I know. I wanted to know it too, when I was living it. But I need you to sit with part 3 for a moment before we get there. Because the lesson of part 3 is not the courtroom. The lesson is what came before it. The decision, made on a bathroom floor and a sleepless night and a Wednesday evening with Marcus at my kitchen table, to stop surviving and start fighting. No one handed me that fight. No one rescued me. I had people who helped me, Marcus, Vanessa, Margaret, my mother, but the decision to stand up was mine. It had to be mine. If you are in a battle right now, any battle, not just this kind, to hear me when I say, Your preparation is your power. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And find your Margaret. Part 4 is the finale. The ruling. The aftermath. Where Daniel and Priya are now. And what my life looks like today. Don't go anywhere. You know what nobody tells you about justice? They don't tell you that when it finally arrives, it doesn't feel the way you imagined it would. You spend months, sometimes years, imagining this moment. The moment when the truth wins. When the people who hurt you are held accountable. When the universe finally corrects itself. And then the moment comes. And it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like relief. Like putting down something unbearably heavy that you have been carrying for so long that you forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. My name is Rachel Myers. I am 32 years old. I live in California. And today, in this final chapter, I am going to tell you exactly what the judge decided. What happened to Daniel? What happened to Priya? And what my life looks like right now, sitting here, on the other side of the hardest thing I have ever survived. This is the ending. And I promise you, it is worth the wait. The judge's name was the Honorable Patricia Chambers. She was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair cut close and reading glasses that she wore low on her nose, peering over them at attorneys and witnesses with the particular, penetrating gaze of someone who has spent decades listening to people tell her stories and has become very, very good at knowing when a story is true. She had listened to everything over 3 days of proceedings. Every piece of evidence. Every testimony. Every carefully constructed argument from both sides. And on the 4th day, she delivered her ruling. I sat in that courtroom with Vanessa on one side of me and Margaret on the other, and my hands folded in my lap and my heart somewhere in my throat, and I listened. Judge Chambers began with the financial findings. This court finds that the respondent, Daniel Myers, engaged in deliberate and systematic dissipation of marital assets in the amount of $47,300 over a period of 14 months, in clear anticipation of divorce proceedings. This constitutes financial misconduct under California Family Code, and this court orders full restitution of said amount to the petitioner, Rachel Myers, to be paid within 90 days of this ruling. $47,000. Returned. I kept my face still. Margaret had coached me no visible reaction, no matter what. But underneath the stillness, something enormous was moving. The judge continued. Furthermore, in light of the documented pattern of coercive behavior, including the disappearance of the petitioner's immigration documents, the unannounced visit to the marital home in the company of a romantic partner, and the explicit communications establishing the intent to use the party's minor child as a coercive instrument, then Judge Chambers came to Lily. In the matter of the minor child, Lillian Rose Myers, this court has carefully reviewed the recommendation of the guardian ad litem, Dr. Sandra Reeves, as well as all supporting documentation, testimony, and behavioral evidence presented by both parties. She paused. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Primary physical custody is awarded to the petitioner, Rachel Myers. The respondent is granted supervised visitation rights on a schedule to be determined by the family court mediator, with the condition that said visitation does not involve the presence of third parties in a romantic relationship with the respondent until such time as the moments after a courtroom ruling are strange. Everyone moves. Attorneys gather papers. People stand and whisper and file out. The machinery of the legal process continues turning even as your entire world is rearranging itself around a decision that took 3 minutes to deliver and 8 months to earn. I walked out of the courthouse into the California afternoon. The sky, that particular impossible blue that still, after all these years, makes me catch my breath, and I stood on the steps and I just breathed. Vanessa stood beside me. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it honestly. "Like I just put down something very, very heavy," I said. She nodded. She understood. Margaret came out and shook my hand with both of hers and said, "You did this, Rachel. I want you to be clear about that. You documented, you trusted, you showed up every single time. This was you." "It was us," I said. She smiled, a real smile, not the professional one. "It was us," she agreed. "I called my mother from the courthouse steps. She answered on the first ring. When I told her, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and she said, 'I told you. I told you, baby girl.' 'You told me,' I said. And I was crying too, finally, freely, standing on the courthouse steps in the California sunshine, crying in the completely uncomplicated way that only comes when the fight is finally over. People always want to know what happened to the person who hurt them. I understand that. I wanted to know too. There is something deep in the human heart that needs to see accountability, not out of cruelty, but out of the fundamental need to believe that the world has some basic moral logic to it. That choices have consequences. That what people do matters. So I will tell you. Daniel paid the $47,300 within the 90 days ordered by the court. Every dollar of it. The financial misconduct finding followed him. It became part of the public court record, discoverable by anyone who looked. His professional reputation in the tech industry, which had been built carefully over years, took a significant hit. Several professional connections distanced themselves. A promotion he had been positioned for at his company quietly disappeared. The supervised visitation arrangement remained in place for 8 months before the court modified it to allow standard unsupervised visitation, because in the end, Daniel is Lily's father, and whatever he did to me, Lily deserves to know her father. I believe that. I have always believed that. But the version of Daniel who walked out of that courthouse was a diminished version of the man who had thought he could take everything from me and face no consequences. The arrogance was gone. Something that looked almost like humility had taken its place. Priya's story is different. When the emails from her work account were turned over as part of discovery, the ones where she had walked Daniel through the mechanics of moving marital assets in anticipation of divorce proceedings, copies were also provided to her employer. A certified accountant who uses her professional expertise to facilitate financial fraud, documented in her own words in company emails, does not remain a certified accountant for long. She lost her job within 2 weeks of the ruling. Her professional license came under review by the California Board of Accountancy. I don't know the final outcome of that review. It was outside the scope of my case, and I made a deliberate decision not to track it. Not because I didn't care, but because I understood something important by then. My energy was too precious to spend watching someone else's consequences unfold. I had a daughter to raise, a career to rebuild, a life to reclaim. Priya made her choices. The consequences were the consequences. That chapter was not mine to write. What I will say is this: she was a young woman who made catastrophic decisions that hurt a child, destroyed a family, and ultimately detonated her own career and reputation. I don't know what she was thinking. I don't know what Daniel told her or promised her or what story she constructed to make it all seem justifiable. But I hope she learned from it. I genuinely do. Because the alternative, being the kind of person who does something like this and feels nothing, learns nothing, changes nothing, is a far worse outcome than any professional consequence. My replacement green card arrived on a Thursday morning. It came in a plain envelope, and I opened it at my kitchen table with Lily in her high chair eating banana pieces and making the particular concentrated, serious face she makes when she is doing something she considers very important. I held the card in both hands for a moment. This small piece of plastic. This document that represents the right to be here, to build a life here, to raise my daughter here, to wake up every morning in California and breathe the air and live the life I chose. They had tried to take it from me. As an act of intimidation. As a way of making me feel like I was standing on ground that could disappear beneath me at any moment. But here is what they didn't understand. A piece of plastic does not make you belong somewhere. The work you put in makes you belong. The life you build makes you belong. The daughter you raise, the friendships you keep, the nights you spend on the bathroom floor, and the mornings you get up anyway, that is what belonging is made of. They could take the card. They could not take the belonging. I put it in a fireproof safe I had bought specifically for this purpose. Then I gave Lily another piece of banana and watched her be completely, magnificently unbothered by the entire weight of adult drama, and I laughed a real, full, uncomplicated laugh for the first time in almost a year. The year after the ruling was quiet in the way that only comes after a long time of noise. I threw myself back into my work with a focus I hadn't had in years, maybe ever. My career, which had been running on autopilot while I fought the battle of my life, suddenly had my full attention again. I was promoted to senior analyst 8 months after the ruling. I started genuinely enjoying the work again, in a way that reminded me of the girl who had first fallen in love with finance in a She is also, increasingly, the funniest person I know, which I was not expecting. Nobody tells you that about toddlers, that they are genuinely, unintentionally, cosmically funny. She keeps me grounded in the present in a way that nothing else can. It is very hard to catastrophize about the past when there is a 3-year-old standing in front of you wearing one shoe and a tiara, explaining very seriously why her stuffed elephant needs a sandwich. I want to tell you the things I know now that I did not know before. I know that trust is not weakness. Trusting Daniel was not my failure, his betrayal of that trust was his failure, and it belongs entirely to him. I refuse to spend the rest of my life making myself smaller or harder or less open because one person chose to use my openness against me. I know that asking for help is not weakness either. The version of me that drove to California at 18 believed she had to do everything alone, that needing people was a vulnerability to be managed. I know now that Vanessa sitting on my couch for 3 days, and my mother's voice on the phone, and Marcus walking into my kitchen with a cup of coffee and the truth, were not signs that I couldn't handle my own life. They were signs that I had built real relationships. Real ones. The kind that hold. I know that legal systems are imperfect and slow and exhausting and deeply unglamorous, nothing like television, and that navigating them requires patience and documentation and a very good attorney and the willingness to show up, over and over, on days when showing up feels impossible. I know that the bathroom floor is not the end. I say this again because I believe it is worth saying twice, worth saying as many times as necessary until it reaches the person who needs to hear it. The floor is not the end. The floor is where you rest. Then you get up. And I know, with a certainty that no one can touch and nothing can take from me, that I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Not in spite of what happened. Not despite the hardest year of my life. But partly, genuinely, because of it. Because the woman sitting here today, in her own apartment, in her own name, with her daughter asleep in the next room and a green velvet couch and a fireproof safe and a career she built back up brick by brick, is a woman who knows precisely what she is capable of. And that knowledge is worth something. It is worth everything. Chapter 30 to you soft, direct, warm, speaking straight to camera. I don't know who is watching this right now. Maybe you're watching because you love a good story. Maybe you found this channel because you couldn't sleep and the algorithm brought you here. Maybe you're watching because something in the title caught you, because some part of what I described in that title is something you recognize from your own life. If that's you, if you are in the middle of your own version of this, I want to talk to you directly for a moment. I want you to know that the fear you feel is real, and it makes sense, and you are not weak for feeling it. I want you to know that the people who try to use your love, your trust, your children, your legal status, your money, as weapons against you, those people are counting on that fear. They are counting on it making you small and compliant and silent. Don't give them that. Document everything. Find your Margaret. Hold on to your Marcus. My name is Rachel Myers. I am 32 years old. I live in California, in my own apartment, with my daughter Lily, who currently believes that purple is a personality and that elephants need sandwiches. And I am okay. More than okay. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. If this story moved you, if any part of Rachel's journey stayed with you, I want to ask you for something small. Hit that like button. It tells me that this story mattered, and it helps more people find it who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below. Tell me which part of Rachel's story hit you the hardest. Was it the bathroom floor? The courtroom? The green velvet couch? I read every single comment. Every one. Share this video with someone who needs it right now. You probably know someone. We all know someone. A friend going through a divorce. A sister who is afraid. A woman in your life who has forgotten what she is capable of. Send it to her. And if you are new here, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Because every story on this channel is real and raw and honest. And I believe that real stories, true stories, told without the glamour and the editing and the perfect ending are the most powerful thing in the world.